one of the things I see a lot in the design space as well is these self-rating scales on the side of resumes where they'll put down the skills and then they'll give themselves a self-rating. Uh, I still see a lot of that. I still see a lot of these, and it's just a waste of real estate space. I mean that's I look at this and I mean there's no value from it. Self-indulgent, quite frankly, and it just I mean often you have a good laugh at somebody who is doesn't come across as the most humble approach when see somebody else that's tens across the board and you go, okay, this is like clearly someone who lacks self-awareness and humility, so probably not going to be a fit to work with anyways. But that's a huge waste.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kirill, and this is UX Career with Kirill V podcast. Today I'm talking to Bradley Clark, the Director of Talent Acquisition at Article, a direct to consumer furniture manufacturer out of Canada. We talk about Brad's journey, career journey, and his entrepreneurial journey as well. We talk about career gaps and how companies should be looking at these traveling experiences. We talk about biggest challenges in the recruitment industry, and also Brett shares a lot of actionable advice on resumes, how to stand out from everybody else by hustling, and some interesting thoughts about UX bootcamps. And obviously a lot more. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, Brett. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm pretty good, pretty good, pretty pumped, and was excited to thinking about this conversation. A person with your accomplishments and your background and your experiences, definitely, I'm sure you'll have a lot of things of value to share with the audience, and people can learn from you, and maybe figure out and find about some tips and tricks and hacks from your point of view, and how they can overcome the blockers and the screeners and other friction points that the recruitment industry adds to the process.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start with your story. So the reason for this particular section of the conversation is so people can understand the diversity of your experiences. They can really kind of feel you more and feel your story from the human point of view, human being point of view. And I want to touch a bit more on some of the chapters in your career path because they're frankly quite uh, curious to me, and I would love to learn more. So it looks like that you had a really diverse background with working with many clients as a consultant for one side or as a part of the team of the company. So I'm curious to hear kind of your key steps in how you got to Article where you are working today, and also kind of you can touch on the parallel path of your entrepreneurial nature and how you dabbled in different endeavors trying to solve problems that you observed.
Okay. That's so okay. So
Twofold question.
that's yeah. I like it. And so I mean, so start off with I got into recruitment in the mid 2000s, and so I found myself working for a recruitment agency. That's a tech recruitment agency. That worked out. It was good. I liked it. Learned a lot. Just kind of and about almost 5 years into that experience, that entrepreneurial side of me kind of wanted to kick in and decided that, hey, well, this is interesting. It was more transactional that I liked. It didn't give me a chance to solve problems, and that's one of the things I've realized in my life. Kind of looking back is, helping people and solving problems are two of the things that have been pretty motivational and just part of something I need to do. And it was a little less so on that recruitment agency side. So, uh, well, even though I so left on good terms, left financially in a good place, took a little time off to reflect, and decided that I was going to go on my own and become a consultant. And so started a consulting practice up. Well, actually, kind of, yeah, wasn't 100% sure, but I ended up getting a contract, and then decided that, hey, this makes sense. And now I'm on the inside of the recruitment side of things, so more on which now kind of commonly branded as talent acquisition. And so part of that, so that journey, I mean, I did this consulting practice for I believe about 8 9 years in total there, and so end up working for some big brands. So like some recognizable brands like Best Buy, Boeing, Plenty of Fish, Samsung. That was with the Samsung R&D lab here in Vancouver, as well as working for a number of small organizations. I mean, some of these could be early, just got a first check, a seed round, starting to scale, starting to build. But primarily, my focus really was on hiring and building like high performance tech teams, and that stretches into the often the design space, hiring either teams designers or designers as well. And so again, this was really interesting journey. This was I was enjoying this. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, I realized, and so recruitment was interesting. Is everyone stopped hiring? There was about a month and a half. It was just a massive pause, and everyone's like, "What's going to happen? Is the sky falling? Is all hiring just frozen?" No, companies just didn't know what to do. Everyone, this is just when everyone kind of got sent home. Offices closing down. Go work from home. We'll figure things out. And at that stage, it was like, okay, it's time to make a bit of a pivot here. Even though I was acting as a on-site consultant, basically kind of parachuting in and either owning the process and building up this, or it was still slightly outside. So I knew I'd be the first one out, so to speak, as easy to cut as a consultant. And at the same time, though, is I know in Vancouver, Article was hiring, and they're growing, and they're just consistently growing, and I knew a little bit about them, and I knew they were, kind of founded by software engineers, not founded by furniture people, and they had a good reputation in town. I previously tried poaching some people from them who didn't want to leave, and so that was usually my good indicator. Uh, and so through some conversations, I found myself basically joining the article and starting the talent acquisition function from basically from near scratch, building a team up and helping grow the organization. And then through the pandemic, we went through some really big growth years. And so it was definitely, so this was, well, and then at the same time, while this was happening previous to this, there's some gaps in some of the technology space, which we noticed. And so a friend of mine who was also in the recruitment space, we were talking about how communication to candidates had changed. And so one of the things we noticed was email was response rates for email was slowing down. People were leaving LinkedIn; it was less active, and so we found ourselves, and the competition for candidates was quite fierce. Um, and we wanted to text messaging more and more was becoming the preferred channel, so to speak. People weren't answering cold calls. People weren't picking up their phones. Too much spam out there. It just, but using your cell phone wasn't also the right channel because that's a personal line. That is, it doesn't connect to any of your tools you use. And then also from a legality standpoint, it's just in North America, you're actually not legally able to do due to CAN-SPAN and TCPA compliance reasons. So people want to text, using your cell phone wasn't the right tool. And we quickly realized that there was a few tools out there. They were big and they were cumbersome. And we thought, hey, can we build something? And so as a side hustle, kind of nights and weekends, we started a small scrappy startup, spending a lot of time on whiteboards and ideation and going through this. And so we co-founded a startup called Rectex, which is been now at this stage, I mean, we've been experiencing kind of 3x growth the last couple of years in a row. We've managed to stay bootstrapped. But really, we were solving our own problem, and so that was the interesting thing. Was we got a chance to, as first time founders, kind of dog food our own product. We built a team of consultants, kind of a global distributed team around the world as freelancers, working asynchronously, which has been interesting. We've had people in Asia, across Europe, some in North America, and we've built the product that well, also we want to use, but apparently the other people want to use as well due to the growth we're seeing. So I've, and so currently right now, so that's less of my my day to day is article. That's the hat I wear during the day. My role is more advisory at this stage for Rectex. My business partner, co-founder, he runs the day to day of it. Uh, but I get to see things from different perspectives, like I said. And so I've you know, article kind of mid-sized company. I've worked for big companies. Same time, I also, I've co-founded this bootstrap, scrappy little startup. And so it's interesting because I mean there's definitely some lessons which go across all of these organizations. There's also things which are really specific to companies at certain stages and how they hire, who they need to hire, what that looks like. So that was a long answer. So I apologize. So hopefully listeners here aren't bored to death yet. So
Frankly, it's fascinating because I'm also, I guess, one of those weird types who can prioritize time to work on something else besides their day job, sacrificing some other things of your life, sorry, because it's always kind of really fight for the time. So I'm fascinated how you can combine both, because rectext seems like a very interesting solution to the problem that you're familiar with. So it's definitely, I'm sure it strikes your own nerves and scratches your own itch and all other similar phrases that you can use,
yeah,
eating your own dog food. So it probably helps you persevere, especially for a long time, and sometimes especially during the early stages of launching a startup and building it when there is not enough traction. So did you manage to get Article on board as a client?
interesting enough. I've tried to keep the worlds separate,
Mm.
and so I've left those spaces there. And right now, the applicant tracking system we use at Oracle does not integrate to Rectext.
Oh,
In the future, that might happen, but again, I've just left those spaces separate for the most part. It sometimes it drives me nuts a little bit because like, wow, this is a tool that could really help my team out. But
exactly.
I also want to make sure that I'm, always doing things right,
It's all,
and not mixing these rules too much. So
yeah. It sounds like it's almost like you're excluding your employer from getting the benefits of using your service.
well, hopefully, I mean, we're having talks about integrating again to the ATS that we use currently.
Hmm.
And if that happens, then I'll make that decision. I'll let the team kind of decide how they want to pursue that. I'll remove myself
Yeah, definitely.
to take out my bias from it. But yeah, it's one of those things that does drive me a little bit crazy. It's like, wow, this is so applicable to some of the challenges we face day to day of running a talent acquisition team. So
That's true. From my observations, actually, startups and products that are built by people who are the primary users, so it's like their own pain point, definitely have a better chance at solving the problem the right way. So I'm sure that yeah, it's just a matter of time, and other companies will find more value and will join you as a
yeah,
client list.
I think so. It's interesting. I mean, the HR space especially has had a lot of people parachute in kind of to try and save the day with
Hmm.
solutions that again they really haven't come from that space, and it's
Exactly.
yeah, it leads to a lot of bloated and unusable products at times, unfortunately. So, but
Yeah,
I'm sure people in finance probably say the same thing. Other people who wear different hats, where this kind of savior product managers come in if there's or founders come in with a solution which is maybe not to a problem that doesn't really exist.
that's true. And yeah, I can easily see how this have been happening when somebody with a business idea, just because it's such a huge market and lots of problems to solve in the HR space, thinks just is a great idea to try solve it, but they don't really know. They're not the insider. They don't know it's the first hand, and maybe don't do enough good research to understand the problems and the needs, comparing to yourself as an insider.
Yeah, no, I think you're bang on.
Cool. Okay. So next question I had for you is: I noticed that on LinkedIn profile you have one of your jobs, so to say, is explorer and raconteur.
Okay, yeah.
Can you elaborate a bit more? Because I've heard mixed opinions, not from a recruitment world, but from, I guess, candidates and people who had some gaps in their employment. That it's almost like a red flag for lots of companies, for recruiters, for hiring managers. So, but here you don't hide it. You even like feels like you're proud of it. Can you elaborate a bit more on how companies perceive gaps in employment?
So yeah, so I mean, I think I mean personally, uh, taking that bit of a sabbatical to travel was amazing. And then yeah, I mentioned it as explore and raconteur just as a cheeky way to say, you know, hey, I was out traveling, and that's really what. again, that was that time I took off in between leaving an agency and then going down my own personal path of entrepreneurship. But as far as employers, I mean, to be honest, if this is something which I would say the candidates should also look at, is if that employer is judging that in a negative way, that might not be the employer you want to work with. So rather, I mean, to be honest, if I look at someone and they took a gap off, and maybe that gap was, you know, travel, or just getting some time to decompress, or spending time with family, or dealing with health challenges, or education. There's a million good reasons to take a break, of which I don't need to know any of them, to be honest. So if they do want to share it, that's great, and I'm happy to learn about them as a person. But ultimately, that's not something which, I mean, for me, I ever would, look negatively upon on someone. In fact, I'd say that's probably a really good use of time when you're being, taking control of your career and taking that time off you need for yourself as a person. I say the same thing to my team as well. I mean, like, we never judge anyone in that way. But I think as an industry, I think it's shifting, and I think people are now, because I agree, in the past that would have been something people would have tried to hide, or something else. I think people are finally getting it. I think organizations are finally getting it. I think there's still some late to the party, but they're going to miss out on good people. I think that's going to self-correct itself as a result of that. But as a candidate, if I was wearing my candidate hat, and if I was interacting with a recruiter who was seeing this as a negative, I would be really kind of curious what type of culture they have, like, and what they actually value. Like, do they value, like, are they looking just for me then to be a bum in a seat, who's there punching a clock in and out, or do they value me as a human?
Hmm. Yeah, you're totally right. It's almost like, yeah, it's like dating, right? When it's not like one way street, so both sides have power, or should have power, and should have freedom, ideally, and confidence to to make the call if it's the right choice, if it's the right fit. It's not just kind of a bunch of people applying to companies and they're just like picky selecting based on their own criteria, which usually, or not usually, but often biased. But yeah, it should be more balanced relationship, and I truly believe in this. Yeah.
I think for things to work long term, it has to be. If you're going to actually have it, and if, I mean, I understand. I mean, the market's changed, and I know not everyone has that ability to make it balanced, because they may, especially if you're saying, entering a new field or something else, you may not be able to be as picky. But if you are in that, I would keep looking. Even if you did accept that job, where you're a little, you know, to keep exploring it, and maybe shift the mindset from job seeking to job shopping. This makes sense, and I think people should casually also be shopping, because it puts them in a better position to actually, rather than, hey, I need a job to pay my bills, to actually say, actually, this job better aligns with, this work and the people aligns with what I care about, and makes more sense, and so they can make that change on their terms, and so it kind of creates a better power dynamic between the two. So you can actually, and it's better for employers, because you can have a real conversation with that person. They can give you answers which they're actually saying, versus I'm going to tell them an answer which I think they want to hear. And you interview people, and you can tell that time. You can tell when someone's going through a tough time, and they're trying to say what they think is the best thing to say, versus actually saying what the reality is. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense or not. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense, and I'm just kind of, I can see how, especially during these weird times in the market, more and more people will say something like, "Yeah, I have to get at least any job. Like, I have to pay my bills like yesterday." So, which kind of really definitely messes up the balance of powers, and yeah, puts it's kind of, it's really, yeah, every situation is unique, so it's hard to give any, I guess, hard recommendations, more like a guideline to be more respectful of your own priorities and values and situation. And if, yeah, I completely agree. If I had like a gap in my employment and I went to decompress, even like mentally, and travel, and then a company would see it as a red flag, I would agree. Like, it's probably not the right fit for from the candidate point of view as well. Speaking of this travel, quick question: what was your favorite destination?
Oh, geez.
It's a long list of countries.
It was a long list. Yeah, I think the one which I knew the least about and surprised me the most was Turkey. and I'm a bit of a history geek. Actually, I'm a bit of a geek in general, including history. And so, like the amount of Roman ruins throughout Turkey was absolutely incredible. So all these sites of antiquity and the access to them was really great. Food was amazing. People were incredibly friendly, uh, and it felt like the whole travel experience felt very authentic. It didn't feel like it was designed for me being there as a tourist. It felt like I was just happening and I happened to be there. Versus if you go some of the places which is a little more, say, mature in their tourist industry, uh, yeah, it felt less manufactured, I guess, if that makes sense. So, I mean, it's still, again, take this with a grain of salt. I mean, that was 10 years ago. Now I was there, so
Oh, that's
who
true.
knows? Maybe it's changed a lot, but that was definitely one of the biggest surprises. I thought that was amazing.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's move on to the next question that I had for you. Thinking about your, yeah, let's focus on your role at Article. I'm curious to understand better your I guess reality and what you have to deal with as a employee there. And like generally, I think it's gonna should be more applicable to the more patterns about the whole industry. But what are the biggest challenges right now that recruitment industry is facing? Besides, obviously, probably the influx of resumes and applications because more people are losing jobs. But thinking from the bigger, like what really keeps you up at night? I'm curious to learn more about this.
Sure. The one of the, I mean, there definitely is an influx of candidates coming in, and that's a challenge we do face. The thing that keeps me up at night is how we can be more transparent for people on why they should or shouldn't work with us up front. And so there's a lot of like recruitment people out there, or talent acquisition kind of professionals who are, oh, I want to have more people apply. I want to have more people apply. And I think actually the opposite is I want to have less people apply who are more of a potential like a viable candidate for us. And by viability, I mean someone who is not just has like the skill sets we're looking at and the ability to grow into the role, but also just has a curiosity and interest in us. And so I look at that, and that's one of the things which keeps me up because thinking about is, you know, how are those people? How do we ensure that the people who are going to be successful here know about us, are interested in us, and how do people who may not be happy or successful here also know that's okay, that they know, and I think some of the best organizations do a really good job of that, where like just their culture may not be somewhere you're going to succeed, and that's something bigger which keeps me up at night is saying, okay, how do we make that very clear in a simple enough, accessible way that everyone can understand, hey, I'm gonna be happy here, or I'm not gonna be happy here, and that's okay because I'll be happy somewhere else. So that keeps me up, and then the other one is the candidate experience, and this is it does layer on the volume of applications that we get. I mean, it's crunched some numbers recently. I mean, like so for context wise, Article's about 1,000 person company, primarily hiring across North America, though we do have some hiring in Vietnam. Um, we got just shy of 80,000 applications last year. So 80,000 applications. We hired 430-ish people. Now, not all those people came from applications. Some were referrals, some were headhunted. Uh, and so, like, you do the math there, like, we're not in the hiring business, we're in the rejection business.
That's true.
Like, and for us, I mean, we're a consumer brand. Like, we're a brand where someone could not only be applying for a job in the future, they could be buying our product. And so,
That's true.
the impact if we kind of mess this up is not just felt from like, oh, hey, they're not going to apply to us again or tell their friends not to apply, but literally the impact could be is they may not be interested in our product. And so like we spend a lot of time trying to focus on our communications to make them, to show that we care, to show that it matters to us that they did take the time to apply, they did take the time to interview with us. But we're still trying to find ways to get faster communication and more specific communication so people understand why they were rejected. Because again, of that near 80,000 of the 400 we hire, um, that we're saying no a lot, and it's and the reality is we can't say, we're not able to always specifically say why no, but we want to find better, smarter ways we can. So that stuff keeps me up at night.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand. I empathize with this problem because I've seen this from the hiring side as well, actually many times. That just because of the volume, uh, often it's impossible to spend like human time to write even like the rejection letter. So it's like lots of automation comes into play, and then when they're like candidates can feel it. As a candidate, you can feel that there is a robot, like just a template that was sent to you that you didn't get to the next stage. So it's definitely a bummer. I've heard lots of frustrated candidates complain about this, that it's ruins trust and definitely makes you feel like you're just, yeah, you're not important, and you're just would be a small cog, and like it definitely ruins the candidate experience. Yeah, totally
I,
true.
I think so. What we found. So again, we've recently been working. We've actually been exploring some automations, uh, and but what's the one thing we've been focused on is, so, I mean, a lot of people think there's this kind of like ATS bot or monster that exists there, which filters out resumes and does all these amazing things. I've yet to work with this ATS. That's a LinkedIn myth which keeps getting circulated around. I mean, real humans are. So when you apply, you have to fill out some application questions. Those application questions can then trigger a rejection based upon those, because you may not. Basically, you're finding out like you don't meet our criteria. And so, what most organizations are doing is typically that will send off a generic email, which you won't know why you're rejected. You'll say, but you tick one of these boxes. So maybe you're unable to work in a certain country, or you lack a certain uh, you know training skill set or something else. But there's something there which you just lack the basic threshold to be employed in this job. But then you just get this generic email that says, "Hey, thanks for applying," but you weren't selected, and that sucks. That doesn't feel very great. We've been working on trying to have specific emails for each of those different potential rejections,
Mm.
explaining why they're rejected.
Oh, that's
So,
good.
which is it's still not to the personal level, but at least that way there there was a closing loop, and just in case if you, let's say you tick that button wrong for whatever reason, so in your application process you've been filling a ton of applications, you click the wrong one. We explained that, hey, if this was a mistake, please reply and please fill that out differently, because this is what the trigger was for it. And so, not and our what we found in our experience. So we do a like a candidate feedback survey for everyone who applies, and we look at our scores. And so, since having these automations, about 29% of applicants are automatically rejected through these automations roughly right now. So it's a large volume, since we just started these in August. um, and then again, each of these having different specific emails to tell you exactly why you weren't. But our candidate feedback score has improved. Our communication has improved. We've reduced our first communication by 5 times. So we're communicating way faster to candidates, and the feedback from them is way more positive. Everyone, of course, wants personalized touch, but at least they know why. And I think at least that was there to say, okay, well, yeah, I know I didn't make it. And the feedback we get often, because people can write a little response, says exactly that, and saying that, hey, I realized I didn't explain why, but hey, but at least thanks for letting me know. And I did make it, and then also the reason why, at least from a basic level. So we're trying to do that in an intelligent, human way. I don't think we're. It's still something we're still working on, and it's still there's some room to figure this out. But the pain of the job seekers is real, and I think my team empathizes with that reality. Like it's hard just getting a ton of rejections, and so we want to find a way to let people know that it's where possible, at least so they can understand a bit more behind it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really glad to hear that you're trying to, I guess, uncover the reasons behind the rejection, because this is probably one of the top three biggest frustrations candidates have that I've heard. And I've been there myself, frankly. And it's just so frustrating because as a person who, and especially as a like companies should like, usually companies look for candidates who want to grow and evolve and like progress, right? So this is like essential to grow as a candidate, as a professional, to understand what's missing in your profile, or like your skills or expertise or experience, so you can improve and maybe apply later, right? So But yeah, the vast majority of the companies just don't want to do this, or don't have the capabilities, like the technical capabilities to do this. But the concern I had from companies about, I guess, adding more clarity on the reasons why a candidate got rejected is more was more about the fear that this candidate or candidates will game the system and reapply and select the right answer, so the screener doesn't get them doesn't get this doesn't screen them out. Is
It
it a
it
risk? Is
yeah,
it a real risk?
it's a risk, but it's a bigger risk at tarnishing your brand by not communicating properly.
I agree.
Because people will, I mean, and we get it. We have people who go, okay, hey, this is why I was rejected. I'm just going to tick this box differently. But we that's why we have phone screens and they get screened out. And so I mean, you don't game. It just kind of wastes their time and unfortunately wastes ours potentially a little bit. But it's that's nominal compared to not hearing anything. I mean, number one, I mean, base level is just like at least know you got rejected. Like close that loop. The much
Exactly.
more advanced, I mean, the much more
Yeah.
advanced is that hopefully give a some specifics on why,
Yeah.
and but realistically, like you're gonna have to use some technology to do that. Like it's just the number game doesn't make sense. You would not be able to come close to having, you'd have to have a vast army of people just constantly writing
Yeah.
emails, and
It's
it just wouldn't be
unscalable.
it wouldn't be feasible.
Yeah, I agree. And ghosting is also really probably the worst when there's no just silence, and which happens a lot, even today. I keep
Both
hearing
ways.
of those yeah, scary, I guess, experiences, really frustrating experiences, all the time. Yeah, it's I don't understand actually why. Yeah, maybe because they don't have technology, like just to automate this a bit, and there's just like one person recruiter in house, and they have to deal with hundreds of emails every day. Maybe that's the case when it just doesn't scale, and that's the result of this bottleneck.
That's that's part of it. One of the big things we've been focused on, like is our capacity. And one of the things I've been a big believer in is that, again, similar to like agile software development, like you wouldn't work on 100 features and at once and have them all at 10%. You work on 10 features, get them 100%, work on the next 10, etc. And I think there's too many companies which are trying to post every job at once, and as a result of and so we've been like very mindful on, and so we've built this new capacity model of limiting the number of jobs which recruiters can work on per recruiter. And as a result of that, it's actually much faster. There's a better candidate experience, a better hiring manager experience. But one of the things we had to do is and this is, I'm actually really, we're still evolving and tweaking this, but we looked a lot at lean manufacturing. We looked a lot at agile, and one of the things which inspired us was this T-shirt sizing for complexity, because it's not just capacity; it's capacity times complexity. And so that's something which we've been operating with. And so we have this T-shirt sizing model, and T-shirt sizing, for people who don't know, is just the ability to say, in a simple term, how complex is a, on the software side, how complex is a feature to build. So if it's a medium-sized T-shirt, it's kind of an average. If it's small or extra large, etc. So you can imagine it's just a really quick communication tool to say how tough something's going to be to do. And so we do the same thing, and that capacity model then has like a numerical value to that t-shirt size. And so let's say if someone's working on a number of extra large t-shirts, they can work on fewer than someone who's working on a number of smaller t-shirts, just due to the complexity of those different jobs. And so that allows us to be more focused because we're not taking on too much, leaving candidates having a slow process, poor communication internally and externally. And so that demand, it's helped kind of improve all those things, but also like when we go through spiky demands, and this is something that a lot of companies do, is they'll go through big hiring and then slow down, big hiring and slow down. And so it's smoothed out those demand spikes by just having like a constant flow, having a backlog, and then we just pick away that backlog, prioritize again. I mean, all these things have been solved elsewhere. Like I mean, that's one of the biggest things I've realized is I don't need to solve any problems. I just need to find someone who's solved in a different industry and bring it over. And so we really try to get a lot of inspiration from the tech space.
Wait, so you're using T-shirt sizing for roles you need to fill?
Yeah,
Oh, that's so cool. That's a good idea, actually.
yeah, yeah.
I like it.
So you can imagine like if you're working on a director position, that's gonna be a lot more
Yeah,
complex than if you're working on a junior copywriter.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so
That's true.
and then
That's
there's
smart.
also if you're hiring multiple headcounts, there's a lesser value to that. So the same job's open, we might hire 2 or 3 headcounts from that. So let's say you're hiring a team of customer care agents, then that takes up less bandwidth because just one job posting, one manager versus if you have say 10 separate roles, 10 different managers, 10 different departments. And so yeah, the teacher sizing, yeah, it's been a good tool so far. It's something as we mature, I'm still trying to find a way that can maybe make this open source for other groups to use and take the model and learn from. But it's still a little fragile at this stage. I don't think it's not quite shareable yet. But hopefully in the future I'll find a way to get it out there, inspire some good.
Cool. Yeah, but I like the idea. Definitely. Yeah, I can see how this can be a good help to manage the bandwidth and the workload for the team. Yeah, good call.
But back to your point, it's all these things impact what that candidate experiences, and that's why people get ghosted because recruiters are working on too many roles. They've got too many candidates. People fall through the cracks, even with the best of intentions. And so limiting it speeds like doing less at once speeds things up and improves all those interactions.
Yeah, one last comment on this, and then let's switch to the next section. It almost feels like that if there is ghosting in place for likely these reasons, when just the person is overloaded with number of jobs or number of tasks and all other stuff, right? It's almost like for me as a candidate, this would be a signal that something is not really working well at the leadership level because they don't really give enough support and resources to the HR team, and they overload them, or they cannot really prevent this overloading from happening. This is how I would
Yeah,
decode such behavior.
that's a great observation. And I think one thing which is interesting both ways is again, if you're a candidate, you need to be interviewing the organization, and these are really good important signals to look at. At the same time, as a recruiter, we look for signals from candidates during the interview process and how they interact. So not just how they did in the interview, but how those interactions are, how timed their
Exactly.
communication was, all these things. And so the interview process is much more than just the interviews, both ways. And so, but these are really important to pick up on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was actually on the interviewing side when I experienced some candidates leaving not really the best impression when they just ghost you and they don't respond and they don't even send a follow-up, which for me is just yeah a bare minimum you can do after the conversation, just with basic like thank you and looking forward and all that stuff. Definitely better than nothing. And there is actually yeah I've seen lots of one-on-one interviewing advice about the follow-ups and yeah just kind of the basic etiquette of interviewing. I think it's definitely yeah it's surprising me why so many people still don't do this.
It's a weird world right now. It's a weird time.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the next section, which is probably should be packed with a bunch of interesting insights. Speaking of resume, cover letters, like overall, this part of the interview process. Can you maybe share with the audience the red flags, the common mistakes, what works really well, maybe some examples that really stood out from the crowd that you think somebody else could use, like as a tactic, as a strategy. So all this do's and don'ts about resumes.
Sure. Uh, okay, so I'll start with the don'ts because I think we'll get these out of the way here. Again, these are more North American centric, so take these with a grain of salt depending on where you're applying because there's different resume kind of protocols and best behaviors from different parts of the world. So, but if you're so for North American audience, do not include your photo. I don't care what you look like. I don't want to use that. I don't have that. I don't, to be honest, and it's interesting because specifically for the designs, creative people love sharing their photos. I don't know who loves doing. They must have other creative people who love doing photos but we don't want to see you. It's not part of what should be part of the process. Obviously, there's a ton of bias which that can lead to. We want to remove that as much as possible. So just don't include your photo. It might be a great photo. Have your photo on LinkedIn. That's great, but don't have your resume. Have it on your resume. One of the things I see a lot in the design space as well is these self rating scales on the side of resumes where they'll put down the skills and then they'll give themselves a self rating. Uh, I still see a lot of that. I still see a lot of these, and it's just a waste of real estate space. I mean, that's I look at this, and I mean, there's no value from it. Self indulgent, quite frankly, and it just, I mean, often you have a good laugh at somebody who is, doesn't come across as the most humble, approach when see some people that's tens across the board, and you go, okay, this is like clearly someone who lacks self awareness and humility, so probably not going to be a fit to work with anyways. But that's a huge waste. And so those are things. I mean, other than, again, in North America, obviously there's things not to mention, like sexual preference, date of birth, religion, status, these things. And again, this is just, and we notice this usually as someone who's applying from outside North America. So it's important to take the time to understand what the cultural norms are for resumes. Because again, if you're applying in the Middle East or somewhere else, that might be totally relevant and important to have. So put it on there if that's where you're applying. If, in different parts of the world. But for us, I mean, it's we can't make any hiring decisions based upon those things. So just remove it. It feels awkward to see in North America when you see some of these things. Anything which could age you, I think, is also worth removing. So things like your dates behind school, if it was a while ago, I mean, ageism does exist, unfortunately, in hiring. So where possible, try to remove it. So on the do side, um, just keeping things super simple. Just a really simple resume. I mean, again, especially as a designer, like I'm looking at this as how can you prioritize what's important? And thing I look at this is, and I think, I mean, especially product designers, UX designers, imagine you're a product yourself. In a sense, you're being hired to solve a problem. You buy a product, like, especially like a software product, to try and solve a problem. So on the top of fold, that's gonna be the same as like a product landing page. What is it what are the benefits? What are you selling by us hiring you? What is it that you solve, so to speak? And I think this is something which is, again, rather than thinking like features, which are kind of more like responsibilities, like what are the benefits? And so again, thinking like product language, like features versus benefits. Benefits up front. Say by hiring me, you're going to be able to solve these problems. I'm going to be able to do this for you. I'm going to be able to add value this way, um, and keeping those things focused. Things which, again, it's hard because early on in your career, people have a tendency to put down like great communication skills, team player, all these nice things, but there's no real value to that. I mean, it's the same thing when you see job postings. It's the same thing. Job postings put a lot of silliness in there about, which is just a waste as well. So I mean, it goes both ways. So I'm not trying to point the finger at candidates, but just remove the fluff. Get straight to it. Here's the benefits. Here's why hiring me. Top of full that first half. By the time I get through the first half of that resume, I should say I want to talk to this person. I want to jump on a Zoom call. I want to jump on a phone. And then the rest of the resume is just kind of backing up those claims. So if you're saying, "Hey, here's all the stuff I can do. Here's what I've done. Here's the," and ideally, if you have the ability to, show some of the data behind this. And I think it was Laszlo Bach of formerly the Google SVP of HR. He had this resume formula, which was basically, by doing X, it accomplished Y is measured by Z. And having a formula like that in your resume is really important. So you can just say, "Hey, I did this, and here's how I did it, and here's how it was measured." If you can show some of that data, you can say, "Hey, this impacted this many customers, and we tried this experiment," or here's what it looks like. So data is awesome, because if you don't include some of that data, you're assuming the recruiter who's looking at all these resumes knows what your company is. And a lot of people forget that. They say, "Oh well, of course you should know this company." The reality is we don't. The reality is you need to put down, hey, how big was that company? How many users that company have? How many product releases a year? Was their cycle look like? All those things. So details matter. That's the sum of it. Two or more pages is fine. That's totally great. For people who are new, if you've just graduated and you're looking to get your foot in the door, maybe did a boot camp, or you're finishing up university, don't shy away from having non-related experience that especially involves interacting with humans. Like I love seeing a new grad who says, "Hey, I worked at McDonald's while I was going to school," or "Hey, I worked in retail. Hey, I dealt with humans." It shows. It shows you're resilient. It shows you can think on your feet. I mean, any of those. It shows you can communicate. And so you might want to shy away and hide that experience and say, "Well, it's not related," and I feel embarrassed because it was my job I had when I was going to university, or don't. Those are really valuable. I mean, you don't. It may not be the first thing you show, but I see some people who try and bury that. And if I had two people, one who had some work experience, and like two resumes hand in hand, graduating the same program, but one person highlighted, they're probably gonna get the first call. So the fact they've dealt with humans, I think, is really valuable there. You did mention cover letters. I don't see any value in cover letters. I rarely read cover letters. I feel bad because people spend a lot of time on a cover letter. I would rather spend that time. 'Cause very few cover letters. If you think you can write a great cover letter, then send it. But most people can't. So spend that time and focus it on your resume. Have a base resume and then customize your resumes for your search. Um, and I think the final thing I'd say for dues is keep track of your resumes. Keep track of where you're applying. I would use it. There's a tool called hunter.co, and there's no E in the hunter. So huntr.co. It's a Kanban board where you can track your applications. It's a Chrome extension, so it's really lightweight. You got to use it. It's just a no brainer. Track where your applications go. Track the resumes you're using, and uh, I think that's why my resume advice on that. But I think, yeah, does that cover resumes? I don't know if you want to get into like the actual job search or.
Yeah, I think that's good for the resume. So let's think about like really, yeah, applications, job searching, maybe actually some, especially like in a situation when you're a junior or yeah, just starting out, and there's just gazillion of people who are graduated from the same UX bootcamp, and they have
Yep.
exactly the same portfolio and like zero resume, so to say. So how would you really stand out? Maybe some tips or life hacks how you would go around the system.
Yeah. Hustle. Find community Slack channels. So like in your area. So like there's going to be tech startup uh, Slack channels. Get on those. Start doing. So a lot of people, when they think of their job search, they think like in a linear process. Like, okay, I'm going to apply to these jobs and I might get a full time job. I think you need to think less linear and more kind of experimental and more, okay, what gig work can I get? Can I get myself started on Upwork? Can I do some freelance stuff? Can I get involved in the startup community? Who can I talk to who can I talk to as a founder and just be like, and start doing cold calls, start reaching out to them. Really start thinking about your channels. Again, imagine if you're a product, what are your marketing channels for that product? And so so of course there's applying to, get getting work. You can be active on LinkedIn. You can apply to jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or directly to the companies on the job boards, etc. But there's also that, again, like thinking more fractional. Reaching out and just getting work, getting experience in work. I think is, but that comes from building relationships. That comes from hustling. That comes from go to those startup meetings. Go be active on, again, Slack community locally. Find ways to get some projects on your belt. And so it's really just getting work done. I think that's really the biggest differentiator. Instead of just saying I'm just going to keep applying to the same companies and hopefully after my 100th time applying, they're going to notice my resume. Um, get work, just do work, but at the same time, continue your job search if you're looking for that full time gig, but get out there and get some projects on your belt, have some freelance opportunities, even if they're not paying that well. It's the experience and the portfolio you're building right now.
That's true. That's true. That's good advice. Thinking about the layoffs phase of this market life cycle and the current times and what looks like will be a rough year, 2023. Do you have any, I guess, special advice in addition to that? Because I think hustle is like universal one. Even before layoffs, even like 2 years ago, it was still something I was recommending to folks that I was speaking to as a strategy. And I think it definitely, especially when you don't have a lot of clout and a lot of reputation, so on like maybe big names that you worked for and like big projects that you can show, is definitely the way I would use to kind of stand out from the crowd. So any maybe unique advice for the job layoffs phase that we're in?
It's a tough time. I mean, I think that hustle still is relevant anytime if you're a new grad. I think it's going to be a little harder. I think being resilient, practicing some like self care, understanding this is a lot more market driven than you driven. So I think there's that part of it, and so like understanding that hey, it's gonna be a tough year. I mean, it may be. I mean, and so I think that's going to be helpful is that resiliency, having that understand that piece of it. Beyond that, I mean, I think the again trying to do things in person, try to find ways you can interact with some humans. Uh, and so again, if there are meetups happening, if there's socials happening in your local area, getting out there, meeting people, interacting, trying to help them out. I mean, even if it's not a paid thing, if people are there, they've got a bootstrap startup and they're early stage, being like, hey, I'd love to just take a look at it and just give you some feedback and thoughts. So you're kind of planting seeds later on because those people might know other people, but it's just engaging and being part of the community. And I think that's going to be, I think it's valuable information. I think it's valuable at any time, but I think it's even more so right now.
Yeah, I agree. You touched a bit on the networking and like in person and remote, like about the Slack groups and all the stuff, communities, and being active there and asking questions and responding and so on, which is great. And I definitely agree. This should be one of the, uh, I guess, primary activities when you're looking for a job, especially at the beginning of your career. Speaking of like LinkedIn and maybe like anything that you can any advice you can give on the how to structure your LinkedIn profile, like any tips that maybe a detractor when you see something in a LinkedIn profile, or on the opposite side, what could be really good and working as a tactic.
Yeah. Having the ability to, again, as LinkedIn is a thing, and LinkedIn is a channel for you. Um, Having the ability to showcase your work, make it easy for someone to contact you, make it easy for someone to see your profile, make it easy to showcase your work on there. I think that's why the biggest thing people make mistake of is they don't have all their contact details on LinkedIn. They don't have their resume uploaded if they're job seeking. They don't have like open to work, like some of the basics. Like just imagine again, take yourself out of it. But if you're going to map out a process, and again, someone who's in UX should probably be pretty good at this. How does someone find you? How does someone contact you? Think of yourself like a product. Map out the journey. What does that journey look like for someone to get in touch with you? Do you use Calendly so then you can remove a friction point instead of me having to, if I do get in touch with somebody and then all of a sudden I don't have to play back and forth for scheduling, make it easy for me. Make it as easy as possible. Again, just make yourself a product. Think of each, map it out.
Yeah, it's definitely UX design exercise, I would say. Like
Yeah.
it's like in a lean format. It's thinking about like those key tasks, right? Like find the phone number, schedule time, find portfolio, like all this kind of key uh, actions that your target audience, in this case, recruiter or hiring manager or another designer,
Yeah.
would have to go through, and then even like measure number of seconds it takes to complete this task, number of steps it takes to complete this task, and try to optimize it and minimize and reduce the friction as much as possible. Because
And when
yeah,
they
every
finish,
second counts.
hey, to be honest, I mean, the best thing would be if someone mapped that out, share it. That'd be such a great project to share. Here's how I optimized finding me, and then map it all out and show the research and show those pieces. And I mean, that's such an easy project to add to your portfolio and a creative one where you say, oh, hey, this person's actually like a really thoughtful thinker, and problem solver there. So I think those are things that I like to see. I mean, I think one of the challenges is, especially if you're in job seeking mode, is just to stare at LinkedIn all day. And so time box it, uh, get on there, have an intention. And so that, be like, hey, I'm going to reach out to these people. I'm going to connect to people. I'm going to like a certain amount of, content. I'm going to share a certain amount of content, but put a window of time and have that as a schedule. So you don't just end up there kind of doom scrolling all day, looking at layoffs and other news.
Yeah,
Be,
depressing.
be intentional, be intentional about your time on there.
That's true. It's really easy to get buried in all this endless feeds and
It,
infinite scrolls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of it.
That's why they designed it this way.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Um,
some smart, yeah, some smart product designers really, they figured it out to keep
yeah,
you hooked in.
exactly. And yeah, psychologists and scientists, behavioral, yeah, design. Could we touch a bit more on the boot camps, UX boot camps, graduates, and if you hired any, and what can they do to really to get in, and maybe what mistakes that you've seen, maybe some patterns specifically to those short-term courses and boot camps kind of programs, because industry has been seeing more and more graduates from these programs, and they're all frankly looking and feeling the same. So the standout question is really essential to get hired for them.
Yeah, so that's great, and I have had so one is I do love boot camps, and I love the quality of people they're putting out. And a lot of people who enter boot camps also have unrelated experience, but it is actually very valuable unrelated experience, which helps them typically, they maybe even mature in their life or something else, and so I think the boot camps have a huge value and place in the overall tech ecosystem. Now, my experience, so at Rectex, again, we're a small, scrappy, bootstrapped company. Especially when starting off with, we worked with different new grads, working on different parts of our product, different stages. And one of the challenges we found was, so we'd hire people as kind of gig work, project based, was, you know, people wanting to apply a heavier weight process than necessary for a small, scrappy startup because they probably just had learned that in school. So, I was thinking about this. I was like, okay, how do I share this advice and what this looks like? And I use a lot of analogies to think because it just helps me, you know, frame things in a certain way. It's kind of like if you graduate from like a culinary school and you learned how to make fantastic multi-course fine dining food and you knew how to do everything from scratch and finding all organic materials and everything else, and there's a place for that, and obviously there's also a time where people need to make burgers, and and part of that is and maybe we don't have time to bake our own buns, but where we can add value is helping us find the best buns possible, helping us get the best meat possible. So even though it's something simple, it's still high quality. And so like some of the experience we had was, you know, again, early stage startup, first time founders, not realizing the amount of design frameworks which existed, the amount of online, let's say like icon libraries and font libraries and other things. And so we found ourselves, we didn't realize that we didn't have to be artisanal in all these things and make these things and so wasted a bunch of time and money saying, oh, we need to design our own icons and do this. In reality, we just had to get a product out to market super quick, test it out, iterate, learn. And so I think it's one of those things. So if you find yourself as, again, kind of just graduating and you may love that, making that fine dining. Reality is not everyone has the time or budget for it, but there's a lot of value from helping them just make a really good burger. Figuring out what that looks like. And so again, I think just understand where the company's at and meet the company where they are. And so again, obviously we're at one extreme at that. We're different space now when we first started off with, and then there's also the full end of the other extreme where you have big teams with big budgets and they can really do those things where they have their own design frameworks. They can really think through problems in a way which is because they're bigger problems, they have bigger teams, be more meaningful and such. But understand there's a whole spectrum there. So figure out where that organization is and how you add value as quickly as possible. Because you may get a chance to do those things further down the road, but they need to get through those early stages and they need to add value. One of the things which, just in a practicality standpoint, which I was a big fan of, is we've worked with some designers who we'd almost do like pairs designing, and literally we'd be, sometimes it'd be something just as simple as on a whiteboard, but other times we'd be there in a design tool, and we're there real time sketching stuff out, figuring out information flows, figuring out user behaviors, and going through step by step what this looks like on the fly, giving real time feedback and making edits versus having a more waterfall. Here's what I took your information, I went away, I made these these wireframes or whatever that and then presenting it and then going back and forth and again, some organizations maybe that makes a lot of sense, but we got a ton of value just from that in the moment. Help us think this through. And it wasn't just a design process. It wasn't like, hey, help us make a beautiful design. It was just help us see this from a different set of eyes. Help us use, I mean, like really thinking about the user and how they're going to see this because that's the value they bring, so to speak.
Yeah,
So
there's gonna design jams and all the
yeah,
yeah, working sessions definitely can bring a lot of interesting insights and open eyes, especially to the stakeholders, to this other side of this experience. So it's not like what they envisioned in their head, but also kind of really empathizing with the users, and yeah, it's super valuable. I agree.
yeah. So
And
hopefully my fine dining
yeah,
versus
I loved it. I
burgers
loved it.
analogy makes sense. So
I love the analogy. Now I feel hungry. Thinking about the best fine dining burger I've ever had a while ago. But yeah, I love the analogy. Awesome. Okay, so this was an amazing summary, and especially for relation to the UX bootcamps. We have lots of folks coming, like graduating every day, so to say, from those. And I agree, there is lots of value in going to a bootcamp, especially for those these first steps and like introduction, and really kind of getting to know the tip of the iceberg, so to say, of the whole skill, the whole profession. And you are totally right, completely agree with you in relation to the career switchers. And when people actually don't appreciate that the skills that they have learned in the previous career, even if it seems irrelevant to them and maybe like not even tech related, could bring so much more value than another candidate who didn't had this, who hadn't had this experience. And customer service, you're totally right. Like, and I know this firsthand, and I've seen many great examples when junior candidates with customer experience in their background definitely can deal with people and teamwork and communication and conflict resolution. So all this what seems to be like really cheap labor work, I strongly believe it helps people learn valuable skills, and how to work with other people and talk to other people. And I think it's super important, especially for designers. So I agree, it's super valuable. Don't hide this. Don't be ashamed of this part of your journey. Okay, one last question. So, if money wasn't a question, what would you do?
yeah, it's I, I don't know, and I've thought about this a little bit. So I want to keep learning. That's probably where I'm learning and solving problems. And I'd probably on the learning side, I'd like to learn more hands-on skills instead of just like sitting in front of a monitor. Like I'd love to learn how to weld. I'd love to learn how to say frame a house. I'd love to learn how to do things tangible and physical because you can. It's neat being part of building again technical things and slides and designs and solving those kind of problems. But I'd like to solve physical problems too. So I'd like to be in a space where I can learn some of those different skills, even if I'd never use them in a professional capacity, just to know I could do those things would be pretty interesting. Uh, and then travel. I mean, I think just having the ability to travel and again, I think just you know without the constraint of time and money being as hard. Because I think that's one of the challenges when like travel's amazing and traveling with family is amazing and challenging on itself. But then when you have that time and financial constraint, how long can I stay here? What can we do? What do you say no to? Uh, it'd be pretty cool. Find it. So learning, traveling, hopefully solving some problems, helping other people. If money wasn't part of the equation.
Sounds pretty cool. Excellent. So let's wrap up. If somebody wants to reach out and just chat or ask more questions, is there a way to find you?
I'm pretty searchable on LinkedIn. That's probably the best channel to get in touch with me. So if they just Google Bradley Clark, they'll find me pretty quick. And they
I'll
know,
include the
and we're
link.
connected as well, so they can double check. They'll see us as because I know Bradley Clark's kind of a basic name. There's a few of us, so at least they'll know the right one to click is the one that we're connected.
I'll include in the link in the notes,
All right,
so they don't have to go make it easier for them for
to
the audience.
remove the friction sounds even better.
Exactly, one click and you're
Yeah,
there. Awesome. Thanks again, Brad, for the time and for sharing all these lessons learned. And I love the analogy. I loved all the tips and hacks and like the job search strategy, especially for like during these times, and for less experienced folks. I completely agree. This is probably the way that I would go about finding a job right now if I were starting out. So definitely super valuable. Lots of smart thoughts, and appreciate it. Thank you.
I loved it. It's all stuff I love geeking out on, and I hope people do reach out and happy to continue the conversation where I can help.